So today's a very special day. We have a very special guest. Before I introduce him, I want to give you guys a little backstory. So, for those you don't know, I took a trip to Paris, France for 11 days this year. I saw the Normandy beaches. I experienced all the town. I read all the history. We had private tour guides and everything. And I came back walking away like I wanted to know more. And so our today's guest is none other than a guy that was actually there 101 years ago, was present, and his name is Ralph Painter. So why don't you introduce yourself? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
I was born in West Virginia, but we moved to Tennessee when I was 3 years old, and I grew up in a little town down in Polk County called Conasauga. My daddy was a lumberman, and so we we lived there until 1940, and we moved to Etowah. And I was drafted in the Army when I was 20 years old. I got drafted, and I was in combat 361 days. I slept under a sheet 2 nights. And I've got 5 Bronze Battle Stars plus the Bronze Star. And that's more than Patton's got.
Whoa. Wow.
But anyway, I've had a good life. I went to Polk County High School, and then I worked for TVA for 38 years in the old coal burning plants. But I've had a good life. I've got one son, and he was in the reserve for 28 years, and he came out as a light colonel. And but I was out of a family that was, I tell everybody, there was 9 boys, and each boy had 2 sisters. And boy, the people start counting. but anyway, but I had a good mom and dad that we really, and I'm the only one living out of the 11. There was 9 boys and 2 girls.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So what was it like growing up in America in the 40s and 50s?
Well, the 40s and the 50s, I don't know. I was a good basketball player, and I had 2 offers, one to Tennessee Western and one for Western Kentucky teachers, which, you know, they're right up there with Kentucky in basketball. But all I was going to get was my tuition, but I'd have to pay my own way. You know, and I was out of a family. You know, there's 11 in the family, and my family couldn't afford to, you know, pay for my meals and my board. So then I just was drafted into the Army.
Isn't the 87th based in Mississippi?
Do I?
Where was the 87th
Well,
based?
I met them in Panama.
Panama.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It was a spin out of the old Second Armored, pack howitzers in Panama. You know, where they haul the guns on the little donkeys and the mules.
Yeah.
It was a spin off of that outfit. There was 2 of them. There was the 82nd and the 40th Armored Field Artillery. We wasn't in a division. Like if they had trouble, maybe we was with the cavalry a lot. And the 101st and 82nd, we wasn't in a division at all. They called us a bastard outfit. When they get in trouble, they'd call us and we'd go and help them out, and then we'd go somewhere else.
Okay.
But we shot 161,000 rounds. That's a lot of ammunition.
Yeah.
And that tank was, the running gears and everything was like a Sherman, but it didn't have a turret on it. It had a 105 on it.
Okay.
And we used FO officers, you know, but I was a tank mechanic and a motor officer,
Okay.
motor sergeant, not officer. I wasn't an officer. I didn't want that job. They got too many of them got killed.
So what exactly does that mean? And also, were you a non-commissioned officer?
Yeah, I was a staff sergeant, and I went through the Armored Force School at Fort Knox, and then I joined my outfit down there, and they brought us back to the States and made an armored outfit out of us.
Okay.
But they was pulling them with half tracks. But when we came back to the States, they issued us the tanks, and we was in the second wave in Utah Beach.
Okay.
But I was in a good outfit, a real good outfit. Had a good colonel, and he took care of us.
I've done a little bit of research, and I don't know if this is correct, but all I could find is, did your artillery field battalion have a number attached to it? All I found was the 87th.
The 87 Armored Field Artillery Battalion.
Okay. I looked on YouTube, and I've done several research on this, and I don't know if they're connected. So there was an 87th Infantry Division, and then there was this, but it also says they were based out of Mississippi.
No.
They weren't?
No.
Panama
And Fort Knox.
Panama and Fort Knox. Okay.
That's where I joined them, in Panama.
Okay.
I was down there 4 months, and we came back to the States.
So what was it like being in a armored self-propelled gun, or SPG?
I went to the Armored Force School there for about 13 months, and so when we joined, my buddy and I, we'd been to motor school and tank school, and it was really funny. There was about 30 boys that went through that school, and they only picked my buddy and I out of that whole bunch, and I never could figure that out. We were the only 2. The rest of them, they put them in the infantry.
Can you explain what infantry and what their job is?
They're the one, see, the artillery was always behind the infantry. We was supporting them, but they was up there doing hand-to-hand fighting, the infantry. you know, they was right up there on top of them. But we was back, and we would shoot. Our FO officers would knew we'd give them one shot, and they'd take their laptop they had, and they could figure out exactly where we'd shoot. Sometimes, well, we'd shoot maybe 10 rounds, and what we do, we had 18 guns, and they'd set it up. They'd go bang, 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 and they thought our tanks were automatic. They thought that was just one tank. but
How did you know which coordinates to strike on the map? Like,
well, the FO officer was always up with the infantry, and they were so good. We had the old boys so good. He was a math teacher, University of Texas. He was so good that we'd shoot one shell, and he'd figure out exactly how to call back and tell us set the guns up. He was so good.
yeah, I've heard. I heard that U.S. tanks during the time were very maintenance friendly. You could basically, if one got knocked out, basically you can like put a new engine, fix some tracks. There it goes, fix.
I tell you why we could do it so fast. This was really funny. We was getting ready for St. Lo, and so one of the old boys, the captain told me, he said, Sergeant, get ready. We're going to move out tonight at midnight. And one old boy said, hey, Slim, said, you know what? I've lost oil pressure. I said, man, we'll have to get a new engine. So we put the old tank retriever, and I told the captain, I said, you give me a little map and I'll catch you before daylight. But just tell me where you're going. He said, so we pulled that thing in the ordnance, and they had 3 civilians there, you know. He said, can I help you? I said, yeah. We need an engine real bad. I said, we need to catch the group before daylight. And he said, do what? He said, it takes us 2 days. I said, really? Are you kidding me? And he said, well, we don't have one. We'll have one in. I said, well, let me take one out of one of these Shermans here and put it in. He said, no. Said, y'all stay in that old house over there. And they had a big cafeteria in there, and we hadn't had a hot meal. Boy, you talk about a big breakfast now. And he said, I want you to show these boys what you can do. So I told them, there was 7 of them. I had 7 boys that was in my mechanical group. I said, now show them how to do it. And you know what? In 45 minutes, I told him to start her up. He said, I cannot believe this. I said, I'll tell you what, when somebody's shooting at you, there's a lot of things you can do.
Funny.
But boy, I'm telling you, but we could really, but we'd been to that school. But here's the big problem we had, and I never would tell the other boys what it was in the other group. The old cowl around the thing had aluminum bolts that held all that cowling around the fan, and those bolts, those engines vibrated a lot, and the bolts would break. Well, it'd get down and hit the fan, so you'd have to take it out and put new bolts in. So I found some of this construction wire that's about 3/16. It's real pliable. You can just bend it like it's real soft. And what I'd do, I'd take that and wrap it around where the bolts were and take my pliers, tighten it up. I never did have to pull engines anymore. But I wouldn't tell nobody about it.
Where were you when you heard about the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor?
I was in a restaurant. It was on a Sunday. Hugh Shelton's restaurant in Cleveland, Tennessee. We was going down to Dalton when we heard about it. And I had a brother, you know, at first they took some boys in for a year, and they found out he was 38 years old, so they let him out. And the next day after, they called him back in and sent him to the Pacific, and he didn't come home till after the war was over. He didn't get a vacation or nothing.
What was the general feeling of signing up and doing this? Were you nervous? And how did your friends feel about doing this?
Well, you didn't have any other choice. You had to fight. You couldn't quit. You couldn't walk off. There was conscientious objectors. They had some of them, but so they didn't have to go. But you didn't have no choice. You had a little corporal as mean as a darn snake. He did what he told you to do. I mean, he.
But my question is, how did you feel about going to war? Like knowing what that means. Like, how did you feel?
You know, I didn't kill anybody that I, hand-to-hand fighting. The artillery, we didn't do that because we wasn't up with the infantry. But I probably killed lots of people, by our guns, but we didn't do no hand-to-hand fighting.
Okay.
The artillery don't.
What was your experience in D-Day?
D-Day, well,
how did it go down the whole timeline?
it was real funny. They told us when we loaded on the ship, we thought we was going to North Africa. Well, we ended up to Utah, and they told us, says, now we're going to pull in, and y'all just run your tanks down to St. Mary Glees, and we'll go from there. Well, we didn't know, but the Germans was on maneuvers down there. They didn't know it. So it was 2 or 3 days before we ever got to the church there at St. Mary Glees. It was terrible. But you know what? They loaded us off at a Victory ship onto an LCT. You put 2 tanks on one. It was just like a wooden boat. Well, we got within about, I guess, 200 yards of the beach. And, they was shooting. It was terrible. So the old Navy boy, he cut the engine off, and there happened to be a board there, 1 but 4 there on the floor. And I told the captain, I said, man, we can't get off here. This water's 20 to 30 feet deep here. Well, that Navy boy said, well, I'm not going in. Boy, he said the wrong thing. The old captain put his 45 right against his throat. He said, I said to go on in. Well, we went, I told him we had it waterproof, and it was about 3 feet deep, I guess. But we had the thing waterproof before we could run about 6 feet in the water before we'd run over we had sides put up on it. But anyway, when we pulled up there, the little Navy boy said, okay. I said, we can't get off here. Boy, that captain, boy, he put that gun up to his throat, I said, going in. Well, we started in, and we hit a mine hole some way, I don't know. And me and the captain was on the back, and we had this little bitty life jackets. It was a belt about 6 inches. It fit you pretty tight, and then it had a CO2 cartridge and had a thing like scissors in it. And what you're supposed to do when you needed it was jerk that loose and then mash that, and it cut the top off that CO2 cartridge. Then it'd blow up around your shoulders, right around your shoulders.
Yeah.
Well, we got off, and we hit this mine hole, and I ripped mine, and the old captain, he forgot to rip his, and it was choking him. So I took my knife and punched a hole in it. So when we got on the beach, one of the boys was next to me. He said, I saw you save old captain's life. Said, why didn't you let it kill him? We didn't like him anyway. He said, that'd have been a good way to get do away with him. But boy, he was a mean old man. The old captain was.
I just imagine him yelling. Oh my gosh.
We was with the 101st. We was backing them up, and the 90th Texas Division was having trouble, big trouble. So they called us to go over and help them. And boy, I'm telling you what, I never saw as many dead American soldiers, and a lot of them it didn't look that good to me. The enlisted man had a white thing upon the back of his helmet, and the officers had one ran up this way. And you know what? I saw 3 or 4 officers that was shot in the back of the head. Their own boys killed them. It was sad.
Can't wrap my head around you're fighting for the country's freedom, and
Yeah.
you execute your own guys. That just
Yeah.
doesn't make any logical sense
Well,
to
it
me.
doesn't. That's one thing about when you're in combat, everybody's like, you know, you're both trying to save your life, and you're looking out for yourself, and you don't want nobody else to interfere with it either.
Where were you when the war ended? Like, where were you?
We were about 90 miles from Berlin in a little town called Quedlinburg. And it was a little town that hadn't even been bombed.
So, did you stay behind as an occupation force for a while?
No, I got out.
But that did go on.
Well, they came out when the war was ended. If you had 85 points, you'd be the first to go. And I had the Bronze Star. I had 80 points, but I was awarded the Bronze Star, and that made me 85. So I got home real quick.
So what is a Bronze Star?
What I got it for was the good work that I did on the tanks. I didn't get it for shooting a whole bunch of people, you know. But it was because I did my job well. But see, you had the Bronze Star, and then the Silver Star, and the Congressional Medal of Honor, and it's a third.
So, what's your message today for all the younger generation and the generation that doesn't know about this conflict?
Well, I'll tell you the way I feel about it. I think whenever a boy gets out of high school, he ought to serve a year in the Army. That's the way I feel about it.
I think that is.
You know what it'd be the best? You'd learn to say yes sir, no sir.
Amen.
No
to that.
ma'am and yes ma'am.
Were you when you got home? I know historically there were pictures for the big giant celebrations. You know, the war has ended, everybody's back home. Historically, I think cities around the United States, celebrated. Like, did you ever celebrate? Like, were you a part of that?
Yeah, when my mother had 4 stars in her windows, there's 4 of us in the service at the same time. And I thought that was nice. That had it in the windows where people could see it. But you know, we didn't have no choice. When you got drafted, you couldn't say, I'm not going to go.
Yeah.
You was gone. Yeah, an old man, he was, lived down below me, and he told, I was getting ready to get on the troop train, and he was in World War I.
Interesting.
And he'd gotten gas, and he had pneumonia. His name was Ruggles. I'll never will forget it. And he said, now I want to tell you something. I want you to remember what I'm going to tell you. you'll be better off being a live coward than a dead hero. Well, one time me and my buddy was going along, and we went by there's an old coal mine, and there was a Frenchman stopped us, and he said, there's some women down in this. The Germans have been raping them. They're down in this mine hole. And I told Randy, I said, Randy, you know what? I remember what the old man told me. You're better off being a coward than a dead hero. I thought, you know what? Something tells me we just need to go down there. And we got out of our Jeep, and we went down this. They had a railroad track went down in under the ground. Got down there, and you know what? There's 30 women down there. The Germans have been raping them. Now, boy, you talk about getting hugs. We got hugs, and we got them out of there.
That's amazing. That is a true act of kindness right there.
Yeah.
Did any of them speak English, or did you understand what they were saying?
No. Well, you know, they wouldn't even let us talk to the Germans.
Oh.
Nobody could talk to them.
I do know after the war, interesting fact, from what I read, a lot of the German scientists that helped us with our space program, helped us.
Well, they were good people.
Yeah.
They were. Yeah. No, we was in this little town, and the little boys didn't have anything to eat, you know, and they'd have holes to put all your scraps in, you know, and those little boys was trying to get something to eat, and one of the officers came up to me. He said, Sergeant, are you feeding these boys? I said, yeah, I'm feeding them. They're hungry. He said, we're not supposed to feed them. I said, you might as well get out of here. So I said, I gave them my food, and Randy gave them his. He said, you're not supposed to be talking to them. I said, don't talk to me like that. I didn't grow up like that.
Yeah.
And we fed them.
Well, I think that was the right thing to do because, you know, even, you know, my viewpoint is, you know, I think, not that I understand what happened, but, you know, in conflicts like that, I just think showing kindness and humanity, even though it's a tragic situation, is the most important thing you can do.
That's right. That's right.
And, you know, and realizing that, you know, we're not perfect, but we should show kindness, and we should.
Yeah, my friend, we were buddies for all the time we was in service. They called us the Shadows. Said every time you see old Randy, you see old Slim. But anyway, we was going down through Belgium, and we was having trouble with one of the tanks. And I told Randy, I said, there's a well down in the pump. I said, get all our water cans and fill them up. So he and John, they went down there, and they was filling their cans, and this Belgium man had this German, and he said, hey, I've got a German here, y'all want him? And they said, no, we don't want him. And he said, well, what do you want me to do with him? Said, I don't want him either. And he said, well, we don't have any way of handling him. And you know what? He shot that fella, and he fell over on old Randy, my buddy. And you know what? That boy he wouldn't get 10 feet from me from that. He got shell shocked over that. And we was in a field, and our P-38s was strafing us. So we had this banner. It was about 10 feet long. And anytime a lot of times they'd get messed up on the front lines.
Yeah.
And we was out there shaking that thing. And I ran out there and got him. He went berserk, and There's an old Sherman tanker, and I put him in there and put the lid down on him so he couldn't get out. But that shell shocked him. He never did get over it. But he just went berserk.
Yeah.
I could have got a Silver Star for that if I'd have turned it in, but I didn't tell nobody about it. But I kept up with him for 40 years, I guess.
Did the P-38 finally realize you guys are friendly?
Do I?
The P-38 that you said was strafing? Did they realize?
No, They thought some way they got the wrong feel.
So a P-38 Lightning, as they're called, is a twin-engined, twin-boomed fighter aircraft. Twin engine. I would say it was capable of attaching rockets,
Yeah.
and it was primarily used for ground. It could also be a high-altitude interceptor. It had the capability to climb very well.
They were the best fighters they had, but the workhorse for the Army was the P-47s.
Yeah.
They were radial engines. Boy, they strafed right in front of us. We could just see them come in right in front of the infantry all day long.
They also called the P-38 the Fork-tailed Devil. The Germans codenamed the P-38 the Fork-tailed Devil.
They shot them Spitfires down. I mean, those ME-109s.
Yeah.
Oh, man, they'd go.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's twin fuselage.
So, did you shoot any enemy planes down?
I shot an ME-109 down. That's the one I told Randy, if we shoot him down, we get to sleep they'd put us a stockade, you know. I shot him down.
Did you ever capture the pilot?
Caught him. They caught him. He bailed out. The plane burned up. I got a picture of him sitting on the hood of the Jeep. He had his leather boots on and everything. I saved his life, I guess.
I don't know something about. Did you ever hear about the Stigler Brown incident? Are you familiar with? There was this incident of where a stricken B-17 was flying over England, bombing raids. From what I've read, history-wise, and this BF-109 pilot saw this. He did not fire. He actually escorted this B-17 across enemy lines. So he basically, and this guy to this very day became friends with the B-17 pilot. So just
I've heard about that. I tell you, now this is a story that is really, the Lord really looked after us. We had a chaplain, and we was in the hedgerow, and there was 4 of us. They let 4 go at a time, and the chaplain, we was facing him, sitting on the ground, right on the hedgerow, and we saw this German plane coming, and this chaplain turned around, put his arms up like this, and I don't know what he said, but that plane, we could see him, and he got within about 30 feet of us, and he just went right straight up. Now that was really something. I mean, he was as far as near that wall. I mean, he was coming there. We could see him. And that chaplain just held his hand up like this, and he just waved at us and went right straight up. The Lord really took care of us that time.
yeah, he really did. It was a pleasure to talk to you. I think I'll never forget this. I think I know some things that I will value for the rest of my life, and it's been an honor talking to you, and hope we can keep in touch. I'm gonna sign off now, guys. Thank you for watching. Please research Ralph Painter. Look at the articles, do your own research. Yeah, this has been a really cool episode.
Yeah, you pick that Ken Russell up on there.
I will.
Read about it.
I wrote him down on my notes, so
Oh,
I'm gonna
sure.
watch videos, do some research.
Thank you.
Nice having a convo with you. Pleasure doing business.